We are running a few minutes, behind, so we want to try to maintain our time as quickly as we can. My name is Mike Vogel. I work with Montana State University Extension Service. I've been with the Extension Service at Montana State since, 1982. It doesn't seem that long, but realities have to kick in at some point in time. For some of you that may not be familiar with the Extension Service or think of Extension Service, as livestock, crops, 4-H, please note that there is a housing program. The housing programs with the Extension Service, which is a USDA parent organization agency that is from the federal, state, and local level. In Montana, we have 61 offices between tribal offices and county offices. And since the early days of rural electrification, Extension Service on a national basis has had a housing program. And that's a group that I work with at Montana State University. And a number of the things that Dr. Masnick talked about as far as some of the undermining housing affordability forces are some of the things that we work with at Montana State University, whether it be working with training and certification for the Montana Low-Income Weatherization Program, with the in partnership with Montana Department of Public Health or Human Services, whether it be a program that deals with healthy housing with HUD. We've been very, very active in working in Indian country throughout the region and the state with the Montana State University-based Native American Housing Technical Assistance Institute, working with the Building Industry Association with training and a number of other entities. So, we're very much involved with that, and I would like to extend, on behalf of the housing program at Montana State University, extend my thanks to the Wheeler Center for taking leadership on exploring solutions to, another critical Montana issue, this time being, affordable housing. Every year, at least for the last 4 years, the Montana State University Extension Service, we conduct informal surveys. I call them "What do the people want?" type of a survey. And for the last couple of years, affordable housing, actually on a statewide basis, more profiled, a bit like the growth charts that were presented, indicate affordable housing is, an issue in our communities. Consumers are seeking, solutions, for that, for sure. At home at MSU, we experience the issue of affordable housing, year-round. The difficulty of, finding folks that can survive with work at Montana State University, finding housing, very, very difficult to bring folks in to stay. And unless they're already in Bozeman, that's sort of a tough chore to bring folks on. With that, let's get this panel underway. We have the title of dealing with this is looking at affordable housing statewide. And between the four speakers, I think I added up correctly, there's about 100 years of experience here. None of them look much more than 30s or 40s. They all started at the age of 5 or something like that, but we have a lot of expertise here. Their assignment was to give some background on their housing challenges in their communities, solutions for addressing these challenges, and I heard this morning, I had not heard this assignment before, but Suzanne said that Julie gave them an assignment if they were queen for the day. Now I'm hoping that when they talked to Bob and Jeff, it was king for the day, but if they were king or queen for the day, what needs do they have in solving affordable housing? In your package you do have a profile, so I'm not going to read that on each of the individuals, but I would certainly like to highlight a couple of things on each of the individuals, and then in the order that they are listed in the program, They will present 12-15 minutes, and hopefully we may have a few minutes for questions at the end. But Jeff Banlock, he is from here in Missoula, originally grew up in Glendive, so he knows the eastern part of the state, grew up in Bozeman, but he has been with Missoula for quite some time with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency in 1982. Served as the executive director in 1985, and then he left the Missoula Redevelopment Agency in 2004, and currently serving as project manager for the Intermountain Development Company. Been working on a project that he's going to talk about this morning with the Market Square on Russell, a mixed-use, mixed-income development project. Bob Goche is a guy that, if you want to know what's going on in Indian country, and that's what he's going to be talking about, he's been around Montana, around the nation as far as a major leader in Indian country housing for many years. When I came to Montana in '82, he's a guy that I got to know, at least by way of reputation, very, very quickly, and served as the executive director for the Housing Authority there for a good number of years, 20 years, I believe. And in addition to that, served nationally in many capacities, particularly with the National American Indian Housing Council. Appointed this year to the Montana Board of Housing. Currently, Bob is the owner of Hoy Leasing Development, an Indian-owned firm that develops and manages real estate on the Flathead Reservation. Sheila Rice, I think most people know Sheila Rice. Sheila's another one of those folks when I came to Montana that I paid a lot of attention to, and now I know why, because we were dealing with a lot of energy-related things when I met Sheila. She was with Great Falls Gas at that time, I think it was. Now it's Energy West, and now I know that she has a background in chemistry, so that's why I had to pay a lot of attention to her. And some of the work that she has done is just outstanding. That I hope that she talks about all the successes that that they have through the Montana Home Ownership Network and the Neighborhood Works Great Falls program. And to wrap up the panel, Suzanne Grogan from Whitefish, the executive director of the Whitefish Housing Authority, been with the city since 1998, and originally was in charge of managing a 50-unit public housing complex for elderly and disabled individuals, and currently working on a home ownership opportunity to create programs to permanently affordable low and moderate housing units for purchase in that area, high growth resort area. So with that, let's go ahead and get the panel rolling, and we'll just start in the order that it's listed there, and we're going to give each person about 12 to 15 minutes, and hopefully we'll have time at the end. So Jeff, come on down.
I'd like to add my welcome to all of you who come to Missoula for this conference. I hope you enjoy your stay here in Missoula. I want to begin my remarks by saying I'm kind of honored to be up here representing Missoula. There are a lot of people in this room from Missoula who are the true practitioners who've been in the trenches a long time. And while you're here, if you get an opportunity to take advantage of learning from them, please do. And I'd like to single out my name, Bob Oakes from the North Missoula Community Development Corporation. Bob is a true trench worker. He has really ground out some important yardage in the affordable housing game. I saw Jim Morton last night. I haven't seen him here today, I don't think yet, but if you see Jim, Jim is with our Human Resource Council. Nancy Hart from our Office of Planning and Grants has got a great deal of expertise in HUD programs, and I can't say enough about the kind of contributions that they can make. And this afternoon you'll hear from Judy Smith, who will talk about Homeward, another very, very innovative program, doing some very great things, not only here in Missoula, but across the state. Colin Banks is back there in the corner. He's one of our private sector angels, somebody who has put his money and his efforts where his mouth is to work on this very important issue of affordable housing. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my two colleagues at the Housing Authority, Andrea Davis, who introduced our opening speaker today, and Shellen Miller, who is my colleague and does a lot of great work with me. So please make as much use of our local talent as you can. There are others in the room who have a lot to offer as well. The first part of my remarks today was going to be centered around a lot of the information that George just debunked. So thanks. And although the data presented in that report may not be focused or current, it is nonetheless data that is intuitively descriptive of what's going on here in Missoula. We are growing in population. Our city is growing through annexation. The cost of land is going up, some 25% or so in the last 3 years. Housing has gone up a similar amount. Our wages in Missoula are certainly not keeping pace, particularly among those people in the low income and the lowest income parts of our community, and it creates a huge, huge challenge. We know that challenge exists because we see that in the number of people who are on our waiting list at the Missoula Housing Authority, people who are looking for homes, looking for housing. And it's all the same people that were talked about earlier. It's people who have debt, who have broken homes, who have had changes in marital status, the whole gamut. We've got them. Seniors, disabled, we've got them, and they are in great need of housing. The project that I want to talk about that we're working on right now is a project that we call Market Square on Russell. When Andrea, in her remarks, talked about how HUD has instructed local housing authorities to become more entrepreneurial, we took that to heart, and we tried an approach to providing low-income housing or affordable housing in a new way. And the way we did that is when an opportunity arose 3 or so years ago, when a 12-acre site on Russell Street became available, when a lumber yard moved, the Housing Authority decided that they would take a very calculated gamble and buy it, with the idea that through a variety of approaches we could make that a site for affordable housing. The big problem that we face, or affordable housing providers face in Missoula, the fundamental problem is the cost of land. So using the Housing Authority's Development Fund, we purchased this 12-acre site. And it fronts Russell, laid out. The left-hand board is our site plan, and to the north is Russell Street, which is a major Missoula arterial. It's scheduled for reconstruction in the next couple of years, and it includes a street that has one of the 5 bridges that crosses the Clark Fork River in Missoula. We know that street is going to be busy. We know that street is going to have tremendous commercial value once that street and bridge get redone. And our developer, I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, recognizes that as well. The least commercially valuable portion of the property is on the very west side of it. It doesn't have the Russell Street frontage, And so we reserved that area for our affordable housing. We wanted to keep the value of the property available to the commercial developer as high as we could, seeing how they know how much we paid for the 12 acres when we sell them the 8 acres. We want them to think that they got the best part of the deal. One of the things that we tried to do in our planning of this was to be a good citizen to Missoula. Everybody who's working on this project loves Missoula. We're crazy about this place. We want to do something good for Missoula. What we've designed in our development is a 1.5 acre park that not only serves our development, but we envision it as being a community resource. We have, right now we're in the process of going through the numbers, but we want to put parking for the development under that park. The land is so valuable, we want to use the land twice. Now, that's a real challenge. And we met yesterday with our architect, and we're still grinding on that. That's a real challenge, but we think we're going to be able to do that. The other part of our project is a community center that will house a daycare. It will be also have a transit meet in it. We've talked with our local bus company. We want to have, if we can, 3 bus lines pulse through our development to give residents and workers there 3 ways in and a 4th way back downtown to the transit meet, so there'll be 4 bus routes they can use. The other thing that we want this project to show Missoula is density. If you have the strength to climb up Mount Sentinel, you can look out almost all the way to Frenchtown. And by golly, we're going to fill this valley. As much as we hate it, and it breaks my heart to think that we're going to do that. We're going to fill this valley. And to slow that, I don't think we're ever going to stop it, but to slow it, Missoula as a community has to learn how to embrace density in a way that we will permit it to happen here. Nobody wanted infill. Infill is the dirtiest word in Missoula. It has been for the last 10 years or so. But we have to embrace this concept of density. Our development provides 276 units of housing and about 40,000 square feet of commercial space. And that's before you factor in the park and the community center. The other board I have there is our architect's rendering of the design of our affordable housing. 3 stories, flats, not very big, but what we wanted to do in this design was to reflect something of permanence, quality. We're not using the most expensive materials we can find. We're trying to use quality materials that create the impression of this housing is going to be here. This is housing you won't mind having as your neighbor. This housing is something that we're going to be able to be proud of, and it sets the bar too for the rest of the development. That was very important to us. We did not want to be the unwanted neighbors in the development that we were planning. So we set the bar pretty high for ourselves. The status of our project now is we have signed a buy-sell agreement with the Cornerstone Development Group out of the Twin Cities. We're going to have about a 9-month period of due diligence where we're going to get through all the entitlements for zoning and subdivision. If we need to do subdivision, we're not sure we're going to do that. We applied this year for low-income housing tax credits, and we're not successful in that. We're going to take the project back next year. Our developer plans to begin the construction of the first phase of their project a year from now. It's a very aggressive schedule, but she wants to be under construction. I'll point out the Cornerstone Group is a women-owned development company, and in my 25 years working in redevelopment, I have never come across a developer I was more excited to work with. The Cornerstone Group is committed to sustainability. Their roots are in public housing and affordable housing projects. Their company walks the walk as well as talks the talk. And part of what makes me so excited about working with her is it's going to be one more thing that happens in Missoula that's going to impress Missoulians. And very excited about that aspect of it. One other aspect of our project that I want to talk about that makes it work is that it is in the 2nd Urban Renewal District, which means that the project is available for tax increment financing to help support the cost of the infrastructure. That is absolutely key. And I want to use that, that bridge. If you don't understand tax increment financing, if you don't have urban renewal agencies or urban renewal programs in your communities, it may not mean much to you. But for us, it means a lot. The way tax increment financing works very, very simply is the cost of the installation of infrastructure, public infrastructure, can be essentially financed by the future tax payments of the development in future years. It's a very, very important tool. We use it in downtown to revitalize our downtown. It's being used elsewhere in our community. I know Billings had a program, Helena has a program, Kalispell's had a program, Great Falls had a program. This is a very, very important tool in Montana, and we're making use of it. I want to just finish up by observing that affordable housing is a community problem in our existing economic market. It will take community partners to solve it. The Housing Authority does not have the resources to do it on its own. We need local government to help. We need state government. We need federal help. We need private sector help. These solutions are never one partner, one person doing it. So if you take nothing else back from this conference to your communities, recognize the need to form partnerships with your banks, with your businesses, your key industries. Everybody has to put a shoulder to this wheel to make it move. It doesn't work. There is no shoulder big enough to solve this problem. I wanted to give everybody else the time, but I'm going to close with a quote from my favorite thinker, and it's appropriate to this conference, and it's a quote from Bob Dylan. And when I got invited to this and was starting to think about this, this came to me, and it's from a song he wrote called The Ballad of Frankie Lee and Judas Priest, and the closing line is, "So when you see your neighbor carrying something, help him with his load, and don't go mistaking paradise for that home across the road." So, thank you.
Great words of wisdom. Right on time-wise, thank you. Bob? Bob with Ahoy.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks for reminding me how old I am getting. I actually thought this would be a time of my life when I'd be retiring. And I sort of am, because I'm doing what I love. And I guess that's some people's explanation of what retirement's all about. I always like to start off when I have an opportunity to address folks by introducing a part of myself. That is, in the program I'm listed as a member of the Confederated Association Tribe, and a lot of people expect to see a more Indian-looking guy up here. And so I always start out by telling them that I was born and raised in Arlena Ranch. My dad was a member of the tribe. He was born in Ronan. My mom, her family were Swedes that came here from eastern Montana. So I got the best of both worlds. Grew up in Arlene and had my education in several Missoula bars. Survived that, but it gave me the tools I needed to go work on the reservation. Today I'm pleased to be here, and I'm delighted that the Wheeler Center invited me. I think that the perspective of Indian housing in Montana is one that that people need to talk about, because there are so many misunderstandings and so many misconceptions about it, including, it's been my experience that every time I think I figured out one of the problems or one of the impediments or what should change so that we can make progress, we find out that it's refined a little bit different. So today I want to just share with you two things. One is I'm here today speaking on behalf of my experience in Indian country, and not for any particular tribe. I don't even know if any tribal leadership knows I'm here today. I did take the opportunity yesterday, though, to call all 7 Montana reservations so that I could have accurate information as to what the current status of their waiting lists are. And I guess I was a little bit surprised, because currently in Montana, there's a waiting list of 4,523 families on reservations. And what saddens me is that the last time I saw this number, and this is not a scientific poll, this was the Bob Gochi poll, was under 4,000 on waiting lists. This in spite of an awful lot of enlightenment and an awful lot of good policy development and an awful lot of hard work from a lot of the people even in this room, Mike Vogel and Sheila and many others. And so today I wanted to focus my remarks on two things. And the way that I can best, I think, illustrate for you what tribes are dealing with today is just for a minute, think about Missoula, Montana. The approximate population here, 70,000 within the 70 to 80,000 within, and I'm not sure if that's accurate, I saw that number somewhere, within the city limits. Well, interestingly, that's about the number of Indians in Montana. Okay? There's about 70,000 Native Americans, the first Montanans living here. Now, we saw a terrific presentation of the challenges you have to address to deal with the affordable housing needs in Missoula. Now let's just take it to the Indian country. Imagine solving problems with only HUD funding. Only funding you can use is HUD. Get rid of your title companies, all your title companies. As a matter of fact, get rid of the courthouse. Any title work will be done through Washington, D.C. Eliminate all the bankers. First Interstate, great company. I've had the pleasure of serving on their Polson Advisory Board, and they're behind it 100%, but we take First Interstate out of the equation. Eliminate the realtors. Eliminate the mortgage brokers. Eliminate the developers. Eliminate municipal government. And eliminate the nonprofits. You have 8 very successful ones here in Missoula. Now deal with your affordable housing needs. That's kind of what the tribes have been dealing with ever since they started building affordable housing. Now, until the late 90s, this was the environment of Montana's and other states' Indian reservations. But thankfully, they passed new Indian housing law, and there was a lot of public attention given to this very issue. That with HUD funds alone, you cannot begin to make any progress at all on affordable housing. And the good news is, some of the federal agencies, and I will give credit to one that I've been especially impressed with, USDA, has jumped in a big way. Indian housing funding nationwide has been flatlined for the last 10 years. There's been no increase in funding, and I think it's true for all affordable housing. In the last 10 or 11 years, it's been very hard for affordable housing developers everywhere. But in Indian country especially, there's been no increase in funding. But the good news is USDA has come to the assistance from the tune in 1999, keep these numbers in mind, 1999 they spent approximately $5 million in Indian country, okay? The last year I have figures for was 2004. They're over $300 million. And we're talking about affordable housing programs, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about community facilities. When we found out that USDA can build a whole city, we said, where have you guys been? We need your help. And largely, and particularly here in Montana, they've really, really reached out to Indian tribes. Unfortunately, many of the tribes have not grasped the hand it's reaching for. Yesterday, I checked 4 of the reservations claim to have no home ownership program. 4 of them. A lot of you have known for a long time are familiar with some of the work that's been done at Salish and Kootenai. We did the first tax credit rent home project. We did the first Indian 515 project in Montana. There's a lot of firsts. And boy, I used to spend a lot of time patting myself on the back until one day I was thinking, you know, we've had a revolving loan program at Salish and Kootenai since 1960. 700 Indian families that have jobs go to that loan program for their housing assistance. They're not at the housing authority. So it wasn't anything I or even my outstanding staff did, but it's that our membership had alternatives. In addition to having a very successful revolving loan program, we've had several very successful banks. And we've had other issues regarding the land that the other tribes haven't had the benefit of. So my answer and my message today is this. It's the market. One of the last things the doctor said was most affordable housing is provided by the private market. They haven't been in Indian country. Today as we talk, there's 4,500 approximately on the waiting list, but there's another 4,500 mortgages that could be made with a certain level of enlightenment. And so here's my solution, and here's what I tell tribes today. It has to begin with tribal leadership, because we are in an age of self-determination. And tribes themselves have to take the initiative. Those tribes making progress have tribal leadership that gets it. They realize that for them to make progress, it has to be their priority. There's a lot of competition for their time. There's serious jurisdictional issues, water rights issues, other political issues. But housing can solve a lot of those problems if they can focus on it. We need to develop sustainable housing models with an eye to protecting the culture. Tribes are very sensitive about land alienation. But there are solutions that are already developed that can protect the status of the land while allowing the market to take place. The 4,500 units that we discovered yesterday, not counting the potential other mortgages, is equal to almost $1 billion in economic development if they're successful in connecting those dots and putting those programs together. One of the biggest impediments, and this kind of snuck up on us, is in Indian country, we deal with a culture that has never seen home ownership as a tool to family stability and growth. You don't see Indians using home equity to send their kids to college and to start small businesses. It hasn't been a tool. They haven't had a parent that owned a house. They haven't had an opportunity to mortgage that house and use it for a tool for financial planning or to put money in your IRA. It hasn't existed. But the opportunity is beginning to exist today. Tribes need to rethink how they look at their individual members with initiative. They have to be able to sustain and support private developers, tribal Indians that want to be entrepreneurs. In the past, if a tribal member looked to benefit themselves, a lot of tribes ran them off with a stick. But they have an important role to play. It's going to be a combination of opportunities and incentives for higher income families to build and pay for their own house. If that doesn't happen, right now, one of the tribes I'm working with, and yesterday I talked to the president and got permission from him, Eugene Little Cow of Northern Cheyenne. Last year we had a summit. He invited all of the working members of their tribe. These are the people that work at the schools, the Indian Health Service Clinic, the BI office. They work at the Housing Authority. They're teachers. 525 of them, big room at their bingo hall. All had a job, and he asked for a show of hands of how many had a mortgage. 2 hands went up. 2 hands went up. I've discovered families down there that are approaching $100,000 in income that are living in low-rent units. They have no business in low-rent units, but there hasn't been an alternative. Access to all state and federal programs is part of the solution. I tell every tribe I work with today that right now, as we talk, there are adequate resources to solve your housing problem if you'll do the heavy lifting. There are adequate resources if you'll do the heavy lifting. John F. Kennedy School of Government Some of you are familiar with Cornell and Begay. They found out the tribes that made the most progress overall were not those with the most natural resources, but those who had the best governmental systems, those who thought out what they needed to do and enforced their rules. Tribal government needs to do that. So as a policy recommendation, I leave you with this today. If you're in a position to work with tribes, make sure the programs not are only eligible for tribal participation, but they're tribal friendly. Now let me give you an example. Recently, the Indian Health Service and USDA sponsored a workshop in Billings, Montana, and they invited all of the providers of water, sewer, other infrastructure that tribes potentially could access. And there were nearly 20 agencies represented at that meeting. 17 of them have never had a tribal application. Tribes are not well educated as what's available. And the second part is sometimes the program is available, but because of a requirement like matching dollars, assessment to the taxpayers, some little quirk that doesn't work in reservations, the program's not tribal user friendly. So thanks for having me today, and I'll be here for the rest of the day if I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Bob. Bob's always been a colorful dresser, and I like his shirt. Don't you like his shirt? Great, great shirt. Okay, Sheila.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the Wheeler Center for putting this affordable housing symposium together. It's a very timely objective in Montana as we begin to see that it's not just in the boot economy of Western Montana, but throughout the state, more and more communities are saying, help, we need housing. I want to start by addressing the idea that there is no inherent conflict between rental housing and homeownership housing. We always need all of them. As the doctor pointed out this morning, it's a very dynamic market, and we will continually have people move in and out of homeownership. Hopefully, they'll do that because they want to. But I believe what happens is we sometimes fight over the pie. The pieces are too small. So my one commercial this morning is, let's make it a bigger pie. The Housing Montana Fund can do that. You'll see these red scarves around. The theme of the support group for the Montana Housing Fund is, my home's in Montana, I wear a bandana. We tried this legislative session, and the last day of the regular session, we still had $2 million in the fund. But we came out with nothing. But today's the next day, the first day of the next legislative funding, or the next legislative cycle. And I want you all to think about this very fact. There is 0 state dollars funding Montana housing. 0. The home dollars, the CDBG dollars, tax credits, those are primarily federal programs that are flowed through the state. The state awards them, but they're not state dollars. There's 600 housing funds in the United States. Montana is one of 6 states that does not have one. We need to look to the state of Montana for provision of funding for Montana and make it a bigger pie. End of commercial. I want to talk today about 2 programs and then a little bit of statewide information that I'd like to share with you. NeighborWorks Great Falls, which many of you know as Neighborhood Housing Services of Great Falls, our former name, was founded 27 years ago by a very activist group of citizens, residents of declining communities in Great Falls, lenders, businesses, and the city of Great Falls. The focus of that agency, that then and today, was rebuilding declining neighborhoods. In the past 27 years, we've built 160 new houses, almost exclusively infill construction. We've done about 60 rehab resales. All of those would be affordable housing. Probably most importantly, we've got about 450 structures that we took out. Housing that was too dense, sheds, garages, etc. A very, very clean and tidy neighborhood today. And what we've found through the use of infill construction is that we now have neighborhoods of choice. We know we're successful because we're not the only ones doing the building in our neighborhoods. We're not the only ones buying vacant lots in the neighborhoods. We have competition today, and that's a successful program when someone else besides the local nonprofit or the local government is doing the work. And we herald that. Great Falls, as most of you know, is a very slow growth community. In the 70s, when the plant closed, the Anaconda Company closed, lost in excess of 3,000 jobs. It's taken Great Falls a long time to come back from that. But we think what's happening now, and you'll see this in kind of that eastern front set of communities, Shoto, Lewistown, Great Falls, is the spillover from the western communities. Our Great Falls Development Authority, the Economic Development Group, actually markets Great Falls to employers as the last affordable large city in Montana. The last city where you can actually buy a house, a workforce person can buy a house. And we see that changing. And so what we're faced with, our challenges now, our Great Falls housing prices are increasing, good for our former home buyers, not so good for those of us still trying to put affordable housing out there. We have competition for lots and we have competition for rehab projects, good for the neighborhood, not so good for affordable housing. And we see that we have a need to take a lesson from some of the high growth communities and get some land early on. A need for land banking is very, very important, and I think that's in a lot of communities across the state. And I might mention that one of the uses for the Housing Montana Fund would be land banking. So you can buy and hold land banking. The Missoula Housing Authority has allowed that to happen here with some capital that they have, but much more capital is needed throughout the state to preserve land for future development. We also see in Great Falls that our mobile home parks are being threatened. There's a new area that was south of the city that's now incorporated in the city, has city services, and there's 3 to 4 manufactured housing parks that are threatened there for redevelopment. Manufactured housing tends to be, as I've heard it described, the largest unsubsidized affordable housing in the United States, and we have to work very carefully and very hard to make sure we preserve those units. We also are finding ourselves moving to rental strategies in Great Falls. When we look at our neighborhoods, they look pretty darn good. Some of the last not so good stuff is rental housing. And so we see that we need to move in a rental strategy to continue to improve our neighborhoods, but also to have the other side of the equation of decent, safe, affordable rental housing as part of living in downtown Great Falls. I'd like to move now to the Montana Homeownership Network, which was started 9 years ago now, as an outgrowth of Neighborhood Housing Services, now NeighborWorks Great Falls. Rural Development, Montana Board of Housing, and some other partners came to the NHS of Great Falls and said, you guys are doing a really good job. You're creating lots of loans, you're doing lots of good stuff. Can you do it on a larger basis? And they were incredibly helpful in putting together what's now called the Montana Homeownership Network. Now you'll note that our middle name is Homeownership, but again, I see Montana Homeownership Network, which will become, and has received approval for the name of NeighborWorks Montana, becoming increasingly involved again in rental strategies and mobile home park strategies. Successes of the Montana Homeownership Network, in excess of 3,000 first-time home buyers since 1998. We have a network of 24 service delivery partners who provide home ownership planning services, including homebuyer education and one-on-one planning throughout the state. We have a central processing hub in Great Falls, so we provide down payment and closing cost assistance to about 75% of those 3,300 homeowners. Recent projects that we've become involved in, and I want to emphasize here that primarily we work through partners at a local level. On occasion, a pilot project will bring us to actually doing work on a local level. And we have received some funding from the CFED Foundation to create some model projects, pilot projects in manufactured housing. So we're working with Salish Kootenai Housing Authority in Ronan. We'll do a 5-unit subdivision there. First house is on the ground as of last week. We also are working with the city of Shelby to do a 10-unit infill manufactured housing project there. And looking potentially at Black Eagle, and also looking for future projects. So if any of you out there have the potential for manufactured housing in your communities, we'd love to work with you. Why manufactured housing? Well, 2 reasons. One is that it's an important answer to affordability. Tends to come in 15 to 20% below stick-built costs. In some rural communities, it's almost the only solution because it's so difficult to find builders. So, some of the reasons. On the manufactured housing park front, we're working with a group of people in Red Lodge, including a group of tenants of the Mountain Vista Villa Park there, to save it from redevelopment. And we have a very unique very unique group of circumstances that happened there. We actually have a year to put together our funding to do that. The Billings HRDC is working with the Homeowners Association to create a functional homeownership association there that can actually buy that park and preserve it for homeownership opportunities with long-term leases. We also are working with a couple groups in Red Lodge. Affordable housing is very critical down there. It's becoming the Aspen of Montana. And again, these parks are so important to preserve them. And I think if we look across the state, everywhere that cities are growing, our parks are really threatened. And when you lose a park in your community, it's not just that you lose that affordable, you also lose those units. You no longer have those units. So that's an important piece that we're looking for, and we'd love to work with people more on that. Another emphasis of MHN is the preservation of the gains of the asset of homeownership. So we have a statewide foreclosure prevention program working again through all of our homeownership planning partners. We've done about 125 foreclosure prevention loans, but probably provided services to about 4 times that number of people. 400 or 500 people, it seems like a lot. There's 800 foreclosures in Montana a year. So if we're pumping 400 homeowners into the system and 800 are falling out of the system at the same time, we're not making any gains in that. We believe the best way to prevent a foreclosure is to have good pre-purchase financial planning, homeownership planning, homebuyer education. And the people that we provide foreclosure prevention services to very much tend not to be our original customers. But we think that the preservation is important, and so that is an idea that we've taken on. Another issue I think we face statewide is the minority gap in home ownership. Across the state and across the nation, minorities have about 50% home ownership rates. Whites have about 70%. So there's something there that needs to be addressed, that can be addressed, and we're working hard with the reservations as well as the urban Indian and Hispanic communities in Montana. I want to move just a little bit to statewide, and I have to give some credit to my friend Michael O'Neill, who works for AWARE and is probably the greatest advocate for affordable, accessible housing for persons with disabilities. And Michael called me and he said, "Are you going to talk about A, B, and C?" And I said, "It's already in my outline." These are the things we need to talk about when we talk about home development, rental or home ownership. Universal accessibility. All you baby boomers out there are going to be on a walker or a wheelchair someday. So let's get these step-free entries done. Let's have a little bit wider turning radius in our bathrooms. Let's have lever handles instead of the turning handles. Very small things that can make a huge difference, but make home ownership and make rental housing usable far, far, far into the future. We have to make those changes today. We also have to make sure that the housing for the very low income and persons with disabilities, who often tend to be very low income because they subsist on SSI or disability payments, to make sure that there's adequate housing for folks out there like that. And other people will address that far better than I. The other thing we're seeing statewide is a connection between economic development and housing. And it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? No houses, no jobs. No jobs, no houses. Can't pay the rent, can't buy the house. So there's this linkage that's emerging, and I think this particular summit is part of that. We had a great session at Senator Baucus' Economic Development Summit in Butte on the connection between housing in general and economic development, and I just herald that, and I think that will be the kind of thing that continues into the future. There is a group of economic developers that have formed a housing task force, and I'd be glad to give you the linkage to that if you want to stop and ask about that. Lastly, I want to say that the Montana Homeownership Network, one of our chief purposes is to provide resources at the local level. So funding for homebuyer education and housing counseling, funding for homeownership planning, pre-development loans for real estate development, both rental and homeownership, preservation programs, pilot programs, those kinds of things are what we want to get better and better at. So I encourage all of you to stop me in the hall at lunch, whenever, and say, tell me about what you need in your community, so we are better able to answer those kinds of needs across the state. And I want to close now by thanking our partners, the people that made the Montana Homeownership Network possible. Fannie Mae was a key funder. The Montana Board of Housing continues to be a very, very strong funder. Rural Development, First Interstate Bank Foundation, and others. When you start naming the list, the danger is always that you've left someone out. So my deepest apologies if I have. There's many, many people, including 24 service delivery partners, who every day do the work of Montana Homeownership Network on the ground. It's a privilege to work in this environment. It's a privilege to know that what you do every day makes a difference to the long-term health of an individual or a family. Financial health, literally physical health, and their futures are completely changed if affordable, safe, decent housing is available for them. So I herald all of the work that you do, and I look forward to the rest of the conference. And again, thank the Wheeler Center for all their help.
And to wrap up the panel, Sue Ann Grogan with the Whitefish Housing Authority.
Good morning. My name is Sue Ann Grogan. I'm the Executive Director of the Whitefish Housing Authority. I was raised in a small town on the northern border of Montana that quite honestly no longer exists. When I grew up there, we were a town of under 4,000. We were the largest population growth since the year 2000. We have grown over 40% in the last 7 years. That means there's now 7,500 people living in our one small town. And so what the Housing Authority is working on, as our goals change, is the preservation of the community that exists there. Incredibly enough, that is what our new wealthy folks moving in also want us to do. There's something about Montana, there's something about Montanans that we're friendly, and they don't want to lose that. My husband, on the other hand, works for the super wealthy. He is a woodworker, a craftsman. If you need a $25,000 front door, you can also come to my house. It's interesting to meet our clients and our mix. But what it does, in my profession anyway, is that it stresses that there is indeed room for all. It's the policies that we create and how we're going to live together that make it possible. I graduated from Bozeman finally with a degree in politics I never thought I would use, but here I do remember one thing, and that is that the more often man comes in contact with his fellow man, the more need there is for law. And it is true in a small town especially. Unfortunately. The Whitefish Housing Authority was created in 1967 as a demonstration of how housing needs change in a community. The Whitefish Housing Authority was created by the citizens at that time strictly for the reason that we needed senior housing. In 1970, they opened the doors for the Mountain View Manor, and that was the only project they ran until 2001. Our public housing is almost 40 years old now, but the Housing Authority has found different needs that we need to address. And so what I'm going to talk about is a little bit how we got there and how those changes have affected the policies in our town. The growth in Whitefish really began, along with Montana, in the late 80s, when we became sort of did anybody tell them that it just rains constantly up there? They don't care anymore. They used to move away. My dad used to have a U-Haul business and a gas station, and we thought we were it, man. You move in, it rains for a year, you move out. It's not true anymore. Folks are staying. So in 1998, the city of Whitefish hired me. My background is in housing. I used to do a lot of public speaking, but I like to say it was never in English. So it's kind of new to me, but now 12 years it's not anymore. We began to grow, and so the city of Whitefish hired me from my Habitat for Humanity background. I worked 5 years for Habitat for Humanity, 3 of which were in the jungles of Papua New Guinea, which was interesting and very grassroots. They used to like to open a house by saying, "Hey, welcome to our village. You used to come down here and we'd eat you." I had a good time after 3 years. So the city hired me, not knowing that I think I'm funny, and that I'm a local. And that meant a lot. In a city government where we're having folks move in a resort town, we tend to cycle city managers, if you've noticed. And we have a very dynamic one right now. So I worked for the city as a private contractor, but what was happening is we were starting to fight with developers very early on in 1998, because the developers wanted to come in and work, and the city felt that if the affordable housing lady was out there saying, "Now wait a minute, you have to have some inclusionary," that we were going to have some fights. So they sent me over to the Housing Authority. It was a very smart move. A housing authority is created for more than building homes. We're also working at the socioeconomic status of the low and moderate income folks that we serve. By dividing the duties, we've actually been able to get something done. In 2000, in the year 2000, the city of Whitefish created the Housing Rehabilitation Program. Our first goal was to preserve the existing stock of homes in our town. We had a home grant. We started with $200,000. We did 35 maintenance projects on the homes in town. That is now a revolving loan. As those homes sell or people refinance, that $200,000 is coming back in. So it was sort of a seed money. The housing rehab program is still available. However, due to our changing needs, it is not a program that we utilize anymore. When we started the program in '98, your house was probably worth $60,000. The bank didn't want to give a loan for the $20,000 worth of rehabilitation needed on that home. That $60,000 house is now worth $360,000. And the bank will loan them money to close the program. We're using that program income for other sources as it becomes available. So once we got the rehab program up and going, we had our 50 units of public housing from 1970. Then we started concentrating on crisis mode. Things were happening around us that we had to take care of. We began to lose a large number of rental units. We lost 16 units, a tax credit program. I think it was rural development that went back to the market. And actually we did try to buy it. It was sold, our offer was for $600,000, a little HUD extra in there. It sold for 1.1. It's on the market again today for $2.2 million. Speculation and the cost of land are our #1 barriers to affordable housing in a high-cost resort area. Those 16 vouchers came over to the housing authorities. We also have a Section 8 housing choice voucher program at this point. So they're now year 3 programs where we used to have 1. In 2003, we partnered with Glacier Affordable Housing Foundation. Again, local resources, local partnerships were key to getting this going. Glacier Affordable Housing Foundation began in 1995. And at the time that we partnered, had just about sold 300 homes. The homes are sold on a equity share program, if you're familiar with a recapture restriction. That is, if you bought a $100,000 home, they don't exist anymore, and you had $70,000 loan, and we brought in $30,000, the we being from Glacier Affordable Housing Foundation and the Housing Authority. You pay on what the affordable mortgage is. So you're paying on that $70,000 mortgage, that's 30% as determined by a bank. The silent second from the Housing Authority is a lien on the property with no interest and no payments. It's repaid when the house is sold or refinanced. This has been working great for Glacier Affordable Housing Foundation. Our first 12 homes in Whitefish. We began the program in 2005. We have sold, and everybody's very pleased with this mortgage. However, even though we may put, and our average subsidy right now is heading into the $75,000 range per unit. So what we realize is that we have $75,000 out there. We're going to get our $75,000 back, plus a maximum of 40% of the equity of that home. So we're going to get quite a chunk of change back. It is not enough. When we calculate it out, given our cost of housing, though we may invest 75 up front, we may get 125. Our next buyer is going to need 145. And those are just numbers that I'm throwing out there. I am not a financial manager. I build housing programs. So what we started looking at was what is the best use of our resources? And that's where you find us right now. In 2003, we partnered with Glacier Affordable. I'm going to go back and forth. And they had the funding. The city of Whitefish increased the funding. We were at $30,000 in Flathead County. We increased it to $40,000 in Whitefish, and we sent 6 people out shopping. 1 person found a house, and we knew we had an issue. We did not have the units, even with a large subsidy, that was still affordable to our buyers. So then in 2004, we created Whitefish Housing Development, Inc., following Missoula's example. And we created a nonprofit arm for our Whitefish Housing Authority that is run by a separate board. And and I actually still run that agency. What that agency does is it is out there to, I guess quite frankly, to compete with the market. Houses were going for over the appraised value. We had to get in there a little faster. and then we began building our own units. So now we have the housing authority and a nonprofit entity which actually builds the units that we need. It still wasn't enough. So we added another layer, and we went back to the city of Whitefish, who was working simultaneously on voluntary inclusionary zoning. Just this year, or I guess it's been in 2006, in January, we went back to the city council. And what we do every January is we try and update what we've done and what we still need to do. So we have voluntary inclusionary zoning in Whitefish. We have an entity that builds affordable housing, and we still have more people looking for the home ownership units than we can supply. In voluntary inclusionary zoning, we have incentives. Now, I used to call it the beg and barter system, and it still sort of is. A developer comes in, he has 3 options, she has 3 options. You may include 10% of the units in your subdivision. You may donate improved land. That means your water, sewer, your curbs, gutters, they're all there. You can donate 10% of your vacant lots, or you can make a payment in lieu of housing. So if the developer does not want to include affordable housing in their neighborhood, they may do a cash donation to the city housing fund, and we will build the homes elsewhere. This seems to be working at this point. And we also have, when we buy these homes from the developer, we created a chart of affordability. The chart of affordability says to the developer, here is what a non-subsidized mortgage for the folks that we serve is. And it ranges from $92,000 to $187,000. At $92,000, you can see the developer is going to lose a little money. However, there's a density bonus. And so what we're trying to do is help the developer find the bottom line. What is the best solution for them? What we're looking at is how we complement each other and what we can get done together. We bought 3 units in 2005 for $160,000 each. They are all worth over $225,000. Again, nobody's going to benefit from the equity until the home sells. Then we found some other, as we're creating our policy, there were some other issues. When you have a subdivision that is primarily made up of second home buyers who live out of state, our affordable inclusionary units are the only year-round residents in that neighborhood. We've come to find the positive in that and find a way to sell that to the developer. That's called stability. You left your water running, anything that you want, there's always somebody home in one of our units, and that's a very positive way to work with the developer. What else from inclusionary zoning? There's politics, and I was telling somebody at the table this morning, my husband was calling me a politician. I denied it for 4 years, but I am. And I'm the politician that gives that developer a black eye. If a development is going to come in, it is not going to contribute. Right now, the Whitefish Housing Authority is the hurdle. And so we didn't want to feel like we were a roadblock, just something they had to understand. The developers now come to our office for black eye prevention, and it works. We have a second development. If you're familiar, we have Iron Horse in Whitefish, a high-end development. We have one growing right next door to it who is trying to learn from what that development had issues with, and that was how it was portrayed, whether it's true or not, that it did not complement the community that sits below it. We have a new one coming in Lookout Ridge. They're offering $1.5 million right off the bat. That is $6,000 per unit times the number of units. We can actually hit a number. So the most positive thing that we've been able to do in Whitefish is to switch away from why build affordable housing, which is the Affordable Housing 101 why, to the how. And since we've made that switch and have been on the positive and thankful route, we're actually making some headway. We have a mayor race this November, and the number one topic that will distinguish who becomes our mayor is affordable housing and mandatory inclusionary zoning. It was very important in creating the policies that we divide up the duties. Governments can do ordinances. What else do governments do? Zoning, things that this voluntary inclusionary zoning that brings the money into the local source that the housing authority draws down. The housing authority, on the other side, creates housing programs. And the housing programs, we manage them, not city council. So there's the micromanagement has gone away as we've made this change and this shift in duties. The biggest word today is complement each other. Nobody else dare touch that if you were queen for a day, but I will. I would buy land. Lots and lots of land. Actually, because land is the #1 barrier, and I would hold that land forever affordable. The 75-year land trust model is something we are now trying to plug in Whitefish, so that when that house sells, it is sold to another buyer. And our goal right now is 12 units a year. In the next 5 years, we should have 60 units of affordable for sale units in town that will always be affordable, 75 years at a time. And then in closing, the one thing I want to stress is that the onus of building affordable housing is making sure that the community that I moved back to and so missed when I was sitting in another paradise in the South Pacific, it's important to preserve that. When we lost our trailer courts, we lost 138 units of affordable housing last year. It's staggering. Grandmothers gone, third generation, kids who are going through the school system where their grandma went, gone. They're living in another area. Who is going to replace? Now, the man who sold the trailer court, it was a change in the use of the land. The small town that I grew up in is gone. His trailer court was on the edge of town and is now surrounded by services, and it will take a different use. But who's going to bring those units back? The private market? No. Only through policy. And the bottom line that we're trying to work with the development community and with the community is to say it will cost all of us unless the development and the growth in our community complements and contributes to the changes. Thank you.
Well, I think they did a very good job staying on time, getting through the information. They're all pressed. Julie, we need your guidance. Whether we are scheduled for a break at 10:30, we're 3 minutes over that. Do you want to allow a few minutes for time for questions, or would you rather have questions addressed to the individuals while they mingle?
I think we better do it while they mingle because it's so nice and it's just sitting here and I think we can take a break.
Okay, let's give a round of appreciation to our